Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be invisible in your own family? To pour your heart and soul into something, only to have it dismissed as if it meant nothing? What would you do if the people you loved most treated you like hired help rather than family? These questions haunted me for years, but I never imagined the answers would change everything. My name is Harper Vance, and I'm 22 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the family's designated cook, cleaner, and emotional caretaker. It started innocently enough when I was 16, helping mom with dinner preparations. But somewhere along the way, helping became expecting, and expecting became demanding. The morning of last year's Thanksgiving began like any other holiday in the Vance household. I stood in our oversized kitchen at 5 a.m., surrounded by mountains of ingredients and a to-do list that could choke a horse. Steam rose from multiple pots while I juggled 3 different timers, my hands already stained with cranberry sauce and flour. The familiar weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders, but I pushed through it like I always did. Mom glided into the kitchen wearing her pristine cream-colored dress, not a hair out of place. She surveyed my work with the critical eye of a food critic, her manicured finger pointing at the golden turkey rotating in the oven. "Harper, darling, are you absolutely certain about the temperature? Last year's bird was rather dry, wasn't it? And where's the gravy? People will be arriving soon." I bit back my immediate response, which would have reminded her that she'd criticized last year's turkey for being too moist. Instead, I managed a tired smile. "Everything's under control, Mom." My older brother Mason strolled in moments later with his wife Brittany, both looking like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Mason grabbed a dinner roll from the basket I'd just finished arranging, tearing it apart carelessly. "Smells good in here, Harper. Though I have to say, Sarah's rolls last year had more flavor. You might want to consider adding more herbs next time." The casual dismissal stung more than it should have. Sarah was his ex-girlfriend from college, someone who'd made store-bought rolls and claimed them as homemade. But I said nothing, just like always. Brittany examined her perfectly manicured nails while commenting, "The table setting looks a bit cluttered, don't you think? Maybe fewer centerpieces? We want people to actually see each other across the table." She hadn't lifted a finger to help with any of the preparations, but somehow felt entitled to critique everything I'd spent hours perfecting. Dad shuffled in with a crumpled piece of paper, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. "Harper, sweetheart, your Aunt Daisy called. She's bringing her new boyfriend, and he's apparently on some kind of elimination diet. No dairy, no gluten, no nightshades. Oh, and little Oliver will only eat chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. Do we have any of those?" I stared at the paper, my vision blurring slightly from fatigue. 24 people were coming for dinner, and I was expected to accommodate every dietary restriction, preference, and whim without complaint. When had I become the family's personal chef and event coordinator? My Aunt Ruby appeared in the doorway, her kind eyes taking in my frazzled state. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. Ruby had always been the family peacekeeper, which unfortunately meant she rarely spoke up when someone should. The morning dissolved into a blur of last-minute preparations, constant interruptions, and a growing list of demands. I found myself making mental notes: remake the stuffing without nuts for Uncle Paul's allergy, prepare a separate vegan dish for Mom's yoga instructor who was inexplicably invited, ensure the mashed potatoes were extra smooth because Cousin Jenny complained last year about lumps. By noon, when the first guests arrived, I hadn't eaten anything except a few bites of bread. My feet ached from standing for 7 hours straight, and my dress stuck to my back with perspiration, but the real torture was just beginning. Throughout dinner, I remained in the kitchen, emerging only to refill serving dishes and clear plates. I watched through the doorway as my family laughed and shared stories, their faces glowing with warmth and wine. Mason regaled everyone with tales from his recent promotion, while Brittany showed off photos from their European vacation. Dad shared jokes that made everyone chuckle, and Mom basked in compliments about her wonderful hosting. Not once did anyone mention the food I'd spent 3 days preparing. Not once did anyone ask if I wanted to join the conversation. I was a ghost in my own home, visible only when something needed to be done. The breaking point came when I overheard Cousin Mark telling his wife, "You know, the Vances always throw such effortless parties. Everything just seems to come together naturally for them. They're so lucky to have that gift." Effortless. The word hit me like a physical blow. I stood there holding a stack of dirty plates, my hands trembling with something that felt like rage mixed with profound sadness. 7 years of Thanksgivings, Christmases, Easter dinners, birthday parties, and family gatherings, and it was all considered effortless. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, turning the faucet on full blast to muffle the sound of my crying. In the mirror, I saw a young woman who looked decades older than her 22 years. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my face had the hollow look of someone who'd been running on empty for far too long. That night, after the last guest left and the kitchen was finally clean, I called my best friend Jamie. She listened to my tearful recounting of the day with growing anger. "Harper, you're not their employee," she said bluntly. You're their daughter and sister, and they're treating you like unpaid labor. When was the last time you enjoyed a holiday instead of working through it? I couldn't remember. Somewhere in my teens, holidays had stopped being celebrations and started being endurance tests, but confronting my family felt impossible. What if they rejected me entirely? What if I was overreacting? What if this was just what family meant? The next few months passed in a haze of therapy sessions and soul-searching. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that my value as a person wasn't tied to my usefulness to others. She introduced me to terms like parentification and emotional labor that gave names to things I'd felt but couldn't articulate. Slowly, I began to see my situation clearly. I had been groomed since adolescence to be the family caretaker, to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own basic needs. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. When Mom called in October to begin planning this year's Thanksgiving, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Her voice carried the same expectant tone as always. "Harper, darling, I've been thinking we should go bigger this year. Maybe 40 people? The Johnsons want to bring their extended family, and you know how much everyone raves about your cooking." For a moment, I almost fell back into the old pattern. The people-pleasing Harper who lived inside my head started making mental grocery lists and calculating cooking times. But then I remembered Dr. Martinez's words about boundaries being acts of self-love, not selfishness. "Actually, Mom, I won't be cooking Thanksgiving dinner this year." The words came out steadier than I felt. Silence stretched across the phone line like a taut wire. When Mom finally spoke, her voice had shifted to the icy tone she used when displeased. "What do you mean you won't be cooking?" "Don't be ridiculous, Harper. You know no one else can manage a meal that large." "Then maybe it shouldn't be that large." I surprised myself with my calm response. "Or maybe everyone can contribute dishes potluck style. I'll bring one item, but I won't be responsible for the entire meal." The explosion was immediate and predictable. Mom's voice rose to a pitch that probably alarmed the neighbors. "This is absolutely unacceptable. Thanksgiving is about family tradition. You can't just abandon your responsibilities because you're going through some kind of phase." Mason got on the phone, his voice carrying the patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years. "Come on, Harper. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know you're the best cook in the family. Why would you want to mess with something that works?" "Because it doesn't work for me," I wanted to scream. "Because I'm tired of being taken for granted. Because I want to enjoy Thanksgiving instead of surviving it." But I simply repeated that my decision was final and hung up. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with increasingly desperate phone calls, guilt trips, and manipulation attempts. Brittany left voicemails about how disappointed little Oliver would be without my famous sweet potato casserole. Dad sent texts about family unity and not wanting to disappoint Grandma's memory. Mom alternated between rage and wounded martyr act, asking what she'd done wrong to deserve such an ungrateful daughter. Each message felt like a needle under my skin, but I held firm. Jamie helped me practice responses, and Dr. Martinez reminded me that their reactions proved how necessary my boundaries were. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up in my own apartment for the first time ever during a holiday. The silence felt strange after years of pre-dawn kitchen chaos, but also peaceful. I made myself coffee and pancakes, eating slowly while reading a book. No timers, no stress, no impossible expectations. Around noon, my phone began buzzing with frantic messages. Photos from the family gathering showed a table that looked like a disaster zone. Store-bought rolls sat next to lumpy mashed potatoes and what appeared to be blackened green bean casserole. Mason's attempt at turkey looked more like charcoal sculpture than poultry. The messages grew increasingly hostile. "Hope you're happy with yourself." From Brittany, "This is what happens when family abandons family." From Mom, "Really disappointed in your selfishness." From Mason. But there were other messages too. Aunt Ruby wrote, "Proud of you for putting yourself first for once." A cousin I barely knew commented, "Maybe now everyone will appreciate what you did all these years." The real surprise came from Dad. His text was simple but profound. "I owe you an apology. I never realized how much we were asking of you. Can we talk?" That conversation happened a week later in a quiet cafe downtown. Dad looked older somehow, more fragile than I remembered. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother and I, we got comfortable with the way things were. It was easier to let you handle everything than to deal with the chaos of multiple people cooking." He paused, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. "But easy for us meant impossible for you, and that wasn't fair." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. Dad began taking cooking classes and actually helped with Christmas dinner. Mom remained resistant to change, but even she started acknowledging my contributions more explicitly. Mason and Brittany, however, doubled down on their entitlement. They hosted their own Thanksgiving the following year and had the audacity to ask if I'd cater it for them. When I declined, Mason accused me of holding grudges and being vindictive. The real change came when I started taking my culinary dreams seriously. I enrolled in a professional cooking program and took a part-time job at a small restaurant downtown. For the first time, My cooking was appreciated by people who understood the skill and effort involved. Chef Rodriguez, who ran the restaurant, became an unexpected mentor. "You have real talent," he told me after watching me prep vegetables one evening. "But more than that, you have passion that's been buried under obligation. It's time to dig it out." Working in a professional kitchen was revelation. Yes, it was demanding and fast-paced, but it was also collaborative. Everyone had specific roles, and everyone's contribution was valued. No one expected me to single-handedly produce miracle meals while being taken for granted. 6 months later, I had the opportunity to cook for a small catering event. Nothing fancy, just a business lunch for 20 people, but it was mine. I planned the menu, sourced the ingredients, and executed every dish according to my vision. When the clients praised the meal and asked for my card, I felt a pride I'd never experienced during family gatherings. The transformation wasn't just professional. I started dating Lucas, a fellow culinary student who appreciated both my cooking and my company. He was amazed when I told him about my family situation. "You mean they expected you to cook for 40 people by yourself every holiday, and they complained when it wasn't perfect?" His disbelief was validating in a way I hadn't expected. "That's insane! Cooking for that many people is a professional-level job." This year's Thanksgiving was different. I volunteered to cook for a local shelter, using my skills to provide a real service rather than enable family dysfunction. The gratitude from people who truly needed a good meal felt infinitely more meaningful than grudging acknowledgement from relatives. Dad joined me at the shelter, and we worked side by side preparing hundreds of meals. "This feels more like what Thanksgiving should be," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead, actually being thankful instead of just going through the motions. Mom attended as a guest rather than helping, but she was pleasant to the other volunteers and even complimented my organization skills publicly. Mason and Brittany stayed home, apparently unable to handle the idea of a holiday that didn't center around their comfort. The real victory came later that evening. Several families from the shelter approached me to ask about catering their upcoming celebrations. Word was spreading about my skills in contexts where they were valued rather than expected. As I drove home that night, I thought about the girl who used to stand in her family's kitchen at 5 a.m., frantically trying to meet impossible expectations. She had believed her worth was tied to her ability to make everyone else happy, even at the cost of her own well-being. That girl still exists inside me, but she's no longer in charge. I've learned that saying no to unreasonable demands isn't cruel, it's necessary. I've discovered that true family relationships should be reciprocal, not one-sided. Most importantly, I've realized that my dreams and needs matter just as much as anyone else's. The relationship with my family has evolved into something more honest, if less comfortable for them. Dad and I are closer than ever, bonded by our shared cooking adventures and his genuine efforts to change. Mom still struggles with my boundaries but respects them more than before. Mason and Brittany remain largely unchanged, but I no longer feel responsible for their comfort or approval. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd recognized the exploitation earlier. But I try not to dwell on those thoughts. The past taught me valuable lessons about my own strength and resilience. More importantly, it led me to a career and life that truly fulfill me. Next month, I'm opening my own catering business. Lucas and I have been developing a menu that reflects both our talents and our shared vision of food as connection rather than obligation. Dad has volunteered to help with the business side, bringing us full circle in a way that feels healing rather than burdensome. The name of my business tells the whole story: Feast of Choice. Because the most important ingredient in any meal isn't what you add. It's the freedom to choose whether you're cooking out of love or obligation. I spent too many years not knowing the difference, but I'll never make that mistake again.